Hello, my name's Richard Felix and I'm going to take you on a tour of haunted Norfolk. We're going to be visiting some different places to normal. We're going to be visiting the Tudor Hotel at King's Lynn for a new ghost story. We'll be taking part in the Norwich Ghost Walk and visiting some screaming pits and also a private house, a farm, talking to a family about the hauntings that go on in that place. But what better place to start this tour than here at Blickling Hall in Norfolk. It's Good Friday and the sun is shining. And we're going to be talking of one of the most famous ghosts in English history, Anne Boleyn. This was the ancestral home of the Boleyns, and Anne, the second wife of Henry VIII, couldn't provide him with a son. She was tried for high treason and sentenced to be executed by beheading. She was terrified of the axemen because they often didn't take the head off in one blow. So Henry, who still loved Anne, sent for the Calais swordsman. Henry didn't know how good that swordsman was until he fetched two felons from a prison, a tall one and a short one. He beheaded them both with one blow of the sword. Anne also was beheaded with one blow of that sword, and her ghost still wanders. On the anniversary of her death, the 19th of May, 1536, every year a phantom coach comes down this road, turns into this trackway here and rides up to the hall. Anne climbs out wearing a white dress with her head tucked underneath her arm and blood dripping onto the floor. The coach and horses disappear and Anne walks up the steps, through the doorway and into the great hall, and her ghost wanders the corridors of Blickling Hall until daybreak. I'm on the salt marshes at Stiffkey. Behind me, a large mud bank called Blackknock. This place was famous for its cockles in the 18th century, and the stout-hearted women of the village used to come out every morning to gather cockles. They used to bring huge sacks, fill them and hump them back. One morning, very early, the women as usual came out, but the fog started to come down. One woman stayed on because she hadn't filled her sack. The fog got thicker and thicker and the tide started coming in. But undaunted, she continued gathering the cockles until she'd realised that she was alone. All her colleagues had beaten a hasty retreat back to the village. She was alone. The fog by this time was so thick that she actually became completely disorientated and couldn't find her way back to the village. The tide started to swirl around her feet. She started to scream for help. Nobody heard, and eventually her screams turned to shouts of anger. Eventually the tide came round her and got higher and higher, and eventually her screams and her cries stopped. The following morning, when the tide had gone out, the villagers came to look for her. They found her drowned body and nearby the half-filled sack of cockles, and they say that on a dark, foggy morning you can still hear her screams and cries of anger, those screams that were unanswered by the people from the village. The fog is coming down now. I know for a fact the tide's coming in and I've only got about half an hour, so I'm beating a hasty retreat. Otherwise it'll be the screams of me, of my ghost, that'll be heard here on the salt marshes of Stiffkey. When I was recently doing Most Haunted Live at the Midland Grand at St Pancras in London, there was an audience of approximately 170 people, and one of the ladies who was interviewed said that she lived in a very, very haunted farmhouse in Norfolk. Afterwards I was chatting to her. She gave me her card, and I said to her, in the very near future we'll be doing a video on haunted Norfolk. Can we come? And she said, oh yes, please do. That's where I am today. Her business card, it actually said Mad Maxie. Her name's Judy. So I think we better go inside and just see how many ghosts she's really got. And I've managed to gain access. I'm at Ivy Farm, Tilney High End. With me is Mad Maxie, Judy, yes, with your granddaughter Abigail and son Grant. And it's not very often that you actually get into a private residence, a farmhouse. They're normally stately homes, castles, shops, pubs and that sort of thing. So this is quite a scoop, and a family that's all sort of experienced ghostly goings on is quite something. So tell me some of the stories, Judy.
Well, I moved in 97, but didn't actually reside here properly until 98. I've got divorced and it was derelict, yeah, and it's been slowly done up. And one thing, a friend knew I was a colleague passing, came in one day quite upset and said, there's two little girls sitting on the gate with hats on, and he said they're watching the passing motorists, but you'd better call them in. And I said, I haven't got any daughters of that age, because he said they're 5 and 7. I said my daughters are in their teens, yeah, and I couldn't convince him. And it was autumn, and there was a lot of tall twigs and brush and walk over there. It was only when we walked through it, he said they couldn't have possibly got here. So that was one story.
Gosh, they were nobody from your family or anything
no,
like
no, no, and they were in long clothes because he thought they were going to go to a party with hats on.
And they'd vanished.
They'd vanished, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the builder that did most of the work, Alan Kirk, when he was making a bathroom window, which is quite deep if you look at the recess,
yeah, very thick walls, aren't they?
Found a key actually hidden in the wall, and I didn't know this, and he took it. And then 3 or 4 months later, his father bought it and gave it to somebody on site, because he said lots of things had happened to him, and they put it back in the wall. But then a day later, it was hanging on one of the wires because it wasn't plastered, and then all of a sudden it vanished. But nobody knows.
And you don't know where it is?
No, no.
There's no cellars here?
No, and it was buried in the wall again, I'm told. I didn't see it happen, but there's no hole.
They actually put it back because of the things that had happened to them when they'd got it?
Yes.
Right.
And then there's the butcher that saw a lady in red. This is about 15 or 20 years ago. I've still got to research that one.
Yeah.
And then Abigail, when she was 8, came here, and the builder, I owed him some money because he was going. It was his last day on the Friday, and I hadn't got enough money. So on the Saturday morning, he came. His son came in the house, and so did Abigail. They went off playing, and it's only in the evening that we're recapping. And Abigail's telling me the story. She said their little boy got locked in the bedroom on the top floor. I said, but he couldn't have got locked in the bedroom on the top floor, Abigail. There's no keys in the door. She said, Nanny, you got locked in. So I said, what happened? She said, well, the little girl that was there, I asked her to open the door. She said she put her hand on the door. I did. And she said, open the door, and the little boy came out. So I said, well, did the little boy see the little girl? I don't know, do I, Nanny? She said, she quite exasperated with me. So, and then I said, well, what happened? She said, I asked her name, and she said her name was Emily Agatha.
Wow.
And
That's
she said, how old are you, Emily Agatha? And she said, I'm as old as the day I died.
That is not the sort of thing that an 8-year-old little girl would make up, if you could. Amazing, that is.
So I thought I'd better shut up and listen, because
yes,
she was really
exactly,
exasperated. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you were saying something about later she couldn't find you.
No, she couldn't find me. I was making a cup of tea, and she said she got quite anxious. So I said, but I was only making tea. She said, but you weren't there. So I said, no, I went to the toilet. She said, I know you did. I said, but how do you know that? She said, because Emily Agatha was coming down the stairs. And I said, where's my nanny? And she said she went like that with her hand, didn't say anything, just as I
pointed to where you were.
Yeah, and came out.
Oh, I see.
So I said, well, where's Emily Agatha now, as I'm pouring the tea? And she said, she's here, Nanny, because Abigail sat next to me. It was on that settee, and we sat over there. And she said, if you don't believe me, you fill the seat, Nanny, it's stone cold. And I put my hand on the space between
And was it?
It was stone cold.
Oh, I see.
It was stone cold.
Do you remember any of this?
No.
Really? Because it was obviously 4 years ago. But you actually remember seeing a little girl, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
And did she look real?
Yes, she did.
Obviously you thought it was a real little girl. And you know when she put her hand on the doorknob to open it, and you put your hand, can you remember feeling her hand, or?
No, I don't remember.
No. But you didn't, of course, you thought it was a real person. You realise now that there's every possibility that it was a ghost. Does it bother you?
No, it doesn't.
Really? And what about going upstairs here on your own?
I don't like it.
Really? You won't do that? Someone has to go with you, which is, I suppose, quite understandable. And tell me, Grant, things have seemed to happen now at your house.
That's correct.
In connection, if you like, with I mean, you've bought yourself an EMF meter, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes.
Yeah.
And I find that when I go around the house, the only activity on it is around Abigail's bedroom.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So in other words, Emily Agatha looks as if she sort of pops over now and then to actually see you.
Well, there was a stage a couple of years ago, it could have been last year, because Abigail loves the cats, she's got some, she sat in the kitchen, and Abigail said, I don't think I believe in Emily anymore.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's this noise. To me it came from the cat's belly, but
You don't think it
we
did?
both heard
From
it.
all over the house because it was like a moaning sound.
And from then on she said, I'll never
I do believe.
disbelieve you again, I'll never disbelieve you again.
Oh, I say.
And it's from then that Grant has had the things happening in his house.
Really? Now, when you're in the house, you're actually not frightened, are you?
No, not anymore.
Because you actually think that Emily Agatha comes and reassures you, if you like,
Yeah,
of...
she's my friend or something.
Really? That is amazing. Well, Mad Max's family, thank you very much indeed. That's been amazing. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm in the little village of Aylmerton. Behind me, the Church of St John. But to the right of me, the Shrieking Pit of Aylmerton. These are ancient, circular, ironworking pits that date back to about 900 AD. But this has a very sinister secret. There's a ghost that wanders around this pit. The ghost of a woman wearing a long white nightdress and long black flowing hair. She's often seen at night, wandering around this field and around the pit, wringing her hands, searching the ground, and every now and then shrieking at the top of her voice. Apparently, she is the ghost of a woman who lost her baby. Lost her baby because her husband murdered the baby. He got it into his head one day that the child wasn't his. He cut the baby's throat, brought it down here, and buried it in the ironworking pit before going back and murdering his wife, bringing her back here as well and dumping her in the pit as well. And that's why her ghost still wanders around the Shrieking Pit of Aylmerton. And I'm now in the centre of Norwich. With me, Dave, Ghostly Dave, as they've nicknamed you in the newspapers, yeah? And of course you do the infamous, the famous Norwich Ghost Walk.
That's right.
And it starts and finishes here.
Yep, at the Adam and Eve.
And I presume there's a reason for that.
There is. The Adam and Eve is the most haunted pub in the city.
Right.
Haunted by a guy by the name of Lord Sheffield.
Yes.
Now, if you know your history, you'll know that shortly before Henry VIII died, he passed a law which stopped the local people from grazing their cattle on common land. Not too popular, as you can imagine.
Yep.
Riots up and down the country. And the biggest riot of all in the entire country took place here in Norwich.
Really?
A guy by the name of Robert Kett, who, believe it or not, was a landowner himself. But anyway, he marched into Norwich to overthrow the law, and a lot of people think he marched to Norwich to actually bring down the king.
Right.
The king sent an army led by Lord Sheffield to throw Robert Kett back out of the city. They met just on this road here. You imagine Lord Sheffield and his army in one direction, Robert Kett and his men in the other.
Right.
Battle broke out, and during the course of the battle, Lord Sheffield realised he was going to lose it. So he did the only thing he could think of, took off his helmet, revealed his identity, thinking he'd be taken a famous hostage. But unfortunate, there's a guy, a butcher by the name of Folks, and he decided he'd rather have a famous scalp than a famous hostage. And with his meat cleaver, he hacked Lord Sheffield across the side of the neck. Sheffield fell dying to the floor, just on the corner there. The rest of the king's men fled. Robert Kett and his army went back to the hills. King's men came back, picked up their leader, who was barely alive, carried him into the Adam and Eve. That's where he died.
In this, so this was here, all those...
Yeah, this pub has been here for 1249 it was built. Oldest pub in
My
the city.
goodness.
Ever since he's died, he's been seen wandering around up and down this area, up and down the stones, and inside the pub itself. If you ask the landlord, or ask the young girls who work behind the bar, they'll all tell you at one time or another, walking up the stairs, maybe carrying a box of crisps, crate of ale, somebody runs their finger through their hair. They don't even bat an eyelid anymore. It's like an old friend of the family. And we've got some tankards hanging up in the downstairs bar. Very often when the pub's almost empty, these tankards will just suddenly start to sway from side to side. No wind, no doors open, but they just sway. And if you stop them, they start swaying again. A couple of years ago we were in the bar, and one of them started to drip. There's about 9 people in the bar, and a young girl behind it, and we all watched as it dripped and splashed on the counter. And finally we went over to see what it was. Not only was that counter absolutely bone dry, so was the tankard, and we'd all watch it drip from one to the other. That's the work of Lord Sheffield.
Wow. I say. You don't think it was his blood dripping then or something
I
like
hope it wasn't. If
Good.
it was, he's lost quite a lot by now.
that? So it's an ideal place, of course, to start the walk from.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. But you've got somewhere else that you can take us, show us something
I
of.
can take you and show you the young lady we call the saddest ghost in the city. She's also known as the Lady in Grey, and she has a very, very sad story to tell.
Really? Shall we go and have a look?
That's why not.
Great, thank you. This way? Right. Right, now, I presume on the left of me here, Norwich Cathedral.
Cathedral, yeah.
Yeah, and this, I've never seen anything like
building, isn't it?
It's called Toonland Alley.
Yeah, Toonland Alley. In fact, even the locals don't know this exists though. People we bring down here who've lived in Norwich all their lives, they never knew this alleyway was here.
Yes, I get
People just
similar.
walk straight past it.
It's amazing.
It's a lovely house.
And, but, how old is it?
1549, and by coincidence, it's the very house that Lord Sheffield stayed in the night before he went on to be killed by Robert Kett.
Good grief.
Yeah, the very house.
Absolutely amazing. And another church here, of course.
Yeah, this is the church. This is where we used to have a rather swift punishment for our looters, the plague victims. If you were caught looting the victim of a plague, if you were caught looting a plague victim, you were taken to this church, taken to the top of the battlements. You had your hands tied behind your back, your legs tied together, and then you were dropped head first to land just in front of those wooden doors.
Oh, lovely.
Lovely, wasn't it?
And
You
then
were thrown-
buried
yeah,
in the plague pit there.
With the rest of them.
Fantastic. Oh, I say. Now, have you got something else for me? You have, haven't you? I know you have.
And I can tell you the story about Sarah,
Right.
the saddest ghost in the city. She's also known as the Lady in Grey. Now, as you may know, when we used to have the plague visit the city, so everybody in the house that died from the plague, the bailiffs would come along and lock the doors, bolt all the doors, cover all the windows, put big red crosses all over the paintwork and leave the dead bodies inside.
Yeah.
That was so that they wouldn't spread the plague any further. Well, we had a really bad plague in Norwich, 1578, brought to the city by Queen Elizabeth I.
Right.
Sure enough, everybody in this house had died of the plague. Or
Right.
so they thought. Along came the bailiffs, covered over all these windows, bolted all the doors, big red crosses everywhere, went away for 5 or 6 weeks.
Yep.
When they came back 5 or 6 weeks later, they found something rather awful. The young girl who had lived in this house with her parents and servants had in fact been alive when they locked her inside. Now just imagine how she must have felt when she woke up to find herself in a house locked and bolted from the outside, all the windows boarded over, a house with nothing to eat, nothing to drink, no food or water. She must have known she was going to die.
Yeah.
Sure enough she did. The way she died was rather horrific. When they came back, the bailiffs, and dragged all the bodies out, they found unusual marks on the legs of the mother, the father, teeth marks. But not teeth marks made by the rats that used to run through these houses. These were human teeth marks. When they examined the rest of the bodies, they found bits and pieces of dead flesh jammed in the throat of the young girl we now call the Lady in Grey. She'd actually choked to death trying to eat the flesh of her own parents' legs. That's why we say she is the saddest ghost in the city, and why very often she can still be seen wandering all around Augustine Stewart House, up and down this alleyway, and even the vicar of the church here has told me through the church itself, through one door and out the other. What a sad lady.
What a story. And of course, lots and lots more stories on the Norwich Ghost
Lots of
Walk.
stories. We have so many stories, we do 2 different walks during the course of the week. We can't get them all in on one night.
Really?
Yeah.
And when do you do them, Dave?
We do the walks, we start in May, the first bank holiday in May. We go right through to the end of September. We do them 4 nights a week. The Monday and Tuesday walk is the same, the Wednesday and
Right.
Thursday walk is the same. Then we have a very short break, and then we come back for what we call our Halloween specials, which are totally different to other walks.
Yeah.
The facts and go out the window and fiction comes in. It's just a case of making people jump as much as we can.
Well, that's what people
They
like.
do like it. It's good fun.
Amazing. And how do they book?
They don't need to book for the actual ghost walks. They just turn up at the pub on the night of the Adam and Eve.
Oh, I see.
We sell tickets for the Halloween walks, but we have to keep the numbers down because of certain places we go on that one. They can buy those either on the night or at the pub on the walks.
Fantastic. Dave, it's been a privilege to wander around a city as ancient as this. I've never seen anything like it. I'm absolutely gobsmacked that there's so many old buildings left.
Yeah, and all got a story.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. This is Castle Rising in Norfolk. This is one of the largest castle keeps preserved in Great Britain. And in 1331, it was in this castle that Queen Isabella was incarcerated, imprisoned She was the wife of the ill-fated King Edward II, who was brutally, horrendously murdered in Berkeley Castle. She was imprisoned here by her son, King Edward III, for sanctioning the murder of his father. She lived here in reasonable comfort, visited by her son, the King, and her grandson, the Black Prince. But as she grew older, she became insane. And they say that her ghost still wanders the ramparts. Many, many people, visitors and guides, have seen this tormented figure of a woman running around the area of these walls, along this corridor, shrieking and screaming. And they say that the sound of her shrieks sounds just like an old, demented witch. It's especially bad, of course, on dark, windy nights, when the wind howls around these corridors and her shrieks can be heard even louder. I'm in King's Lynn, outside the Tudor Rose Hotel, an old 16th century building. It's haunted, otherwise I wouldn't be here. There's poltergeist activity. There's the story of a lady in a cream nightdress that wanders the landings, of a wedding breakfast that got out of hand. The bridegroom actually stabbed his bride to death. Her ghost also wanders the building. But there's a much better story. I've just been inside and spoken to the landlady, and something happened to her in this building a year ago. Something that's not recorded in any books, good ghost guides or anything else. So come inside with me now while we hear that story, the new ghost story of the Tudor Rose Hotel. Now inside the Tudor Rose. Francis, hi. Now we've already met once because I've already been and done a recce, but you've got a new ghost story
Yes, I have.
to do with this building that nobody knows about.
That
Well,
nobody knows since last April. It's a new one that happened April the 4th last year,
right, so it's just over a year ago.
just over a year. And it started, it was in this bar. I was working a normal Friday night shift, and about 10:15, 10 o'clock, I turned around and I said to somebody, is the guy in the corner ever going to order a drink?
Yeah.
And there was a man sitting in the corner by the bench seat there, and he had a trilby hat on, a green feather on the left-hand side, and a long brown trench coat. And he sat there, just stared straight at me, and I was serving behind the bar. Then he disappeared. Then
Just what you mean? Did you turn away and look back, or
I just stayed looking, and he went. He just wasn't there. I blinked. I don't know. And
you know
went.
when he was looking at you? Could you? Did he know you were there? Was he looking at you?
He was looking directly at me.
He knew you were there
Yeah,
as well as you
directly-
knew he was.
directly at me, and he was as clear as you are now. And he disappeared or went.
Yes.
Or I didn't see him anymore, and he came back about 10 minutes later, and I said again, he's back again, and this time
In the same spot?
Exactly the same spot. This time he was looking out towards where the dogs sit up there,
Yes.
and he was sitting reading a broadsheet newspaper, drinking a coffee, and I could see the steam. And I said to at least 15 or 20 customers, "Can you see him?"
So the bar was
Right.
packed with
Nobody could
people.
see him. And nobody could see him, but everybody that knows me knows I'm down to earth and you. By my abs, I was
Yeah, I mean they weren't ridiculing you and saying, "Oh, for goodness' sake, how much have you had to drink?" And
no, and my legs, and that was one of the first times that, like lead, absolutely rooted to the spot. And he stayed for about another 5 minutes, and once again he went, and he came back about another 15, 20 minutes after that. So this time it was about 10:30, and this time he appeared to be sitting by a fire, and he had half slipperettes, reddish brown leather on, no coat, no hat, and he appeared to be sitting by a fire. And by this time, absolutely rooted to the spot, paranoid.
with people round you.
Totally full, totally busy bar. My eldest children, my partner, everybody knew there was something wrong with me. And then he just sort of disappeared again.
This is the third
And
time.
the fourth time he appeared was shortly afterwards, and where the arch is that actually now goes into the gents,
Right.
it was appeared to be a pale green wooden kitchen, and I could distinctly hear 3 people, 3 women laughing and joking behind him. I said to my partner, he's back again, and I'm like really scared. And he said, don't worry, get the dog in, get Merlin in.
Right.
And I have a blue male collie, and she's a nutcase.
Yes.
She comes in, you've met her.
Yes, I have
she
indeed.
She comes in and she eats the beer mats and wiggles. She came straight in from the back door. She walked in front of 25, 30 people.
This is Merlin.
This
Hey,
is Merlin.
hello.
See,
She's bonkers, isn't she? Hey.
Case.
Now, of course, dogs are frightened of ghosts normally.
Well, either they're frightened or they're responsive.
Yes.
Responsive.
Yeah.
They're susceptible to another.
Yeah, exactly.
So Merlin came in front of 25 customers, including my children, my partner, and everybody else, and she jumped straight on the bench where I could still see the man clear as anything, and put her head on what would be his lap, and her tail over the edge, and even I went like that, and she'd listened to me. She never moved. Not.
She was happy
muscle.
with
happy,
him.
Perfectly content, perfectly at ease. I wasn't.
I can imagine
I
it.
was. And then no, I never saw him anymore that night. And then the next day I went and had a sleep before opening up time. And I said to my daughter and somebody else, get me up by 11.
Yeah.
Because I was tired of a freak date.
I can imagine.
And they didn't. And at that time there was a gypsy woman came to the front of the hotel with my daughter was there and this other receptionist at the time and said, I must speak to the landlady. I've never been to Lynn before. She needs me. And they never got me. They actually then predicted Paula, her name, Paula Williams, they predicted Paula's future and said she would have a baby, which she's just had on March the 5th this year. It was my first grandchild. And that went on, they never got me. Then 2 weeks later, we had two residents stay from Yarmouth, who we never knew, I'd never met them.
Right.
They were in the bar one Saturday night, I didn't know they were even residents. And the gentleman turned around and he said to me, Isaiah's coming to you through her. And he pointed to my eldest daughter, Sarah, who was working on the bar. And I looked at him and I thought, you're a bit freaky.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
What
Yeah.
are you on? And he said, Isaiah can't get to you, but he's coming through Sarah. You know, weirdos. And he didn't know any of what had happened the night before.
It was only the night before.
It was only that it was the Friday night, and the gypsy had come the Saturday
Daytime.
morning, and then these people checked in on Saturday, and then on the Sunday I checked him out, him and his wife, and he said, come with me, and he stood basically where your cameraman is now, and he held my hands and he said a prayer, and he said, as Isaiah, an old fenman, wanted to spend another day in the place he'd been happiest, and spend it with you, but he won't be back. And I was really hot, and this guy held my hands. I thought he was a bit of a funny person.
Oh, yeah.
He held my hands, and I was hot as anything, and he disappeared. And he went, he checked out, and I'd never seen him or anything else. But it was a time of crisis in the hotel as well, in terms of personalities and relationships.
Yes,
and everything else.
yes,
So
this is what it's all about, you know.
Whether that had come from that, I don't know.
Well, it does frequently when people are. That's the wrong word, but if there's problems in the household or people
Well,
are
my
emotionally.
father of 17 years had just asked me to marry him on March the 30th, and on April the 4th I saw this man, and we're now no longer together.
There you are. Yeah, it happens so
He
often.
actually blamed the ghost.
I think he did. And you've never seen the ghost again? No one else has reported seeing him
No,
before?
the only other strange thing, at the same time we had a fisherman called Luke, a Belgian fisherman. He used to, when he docked in, he'd come in and stay, and he saw Sarah and I, my daughter, sitting there one night, and he came over, and he's a heavy Belgian accent, and he said, it's really cold in here, really cold. And he phoned his mother in Belgium when she lit a candle. Apparently she was that worried for him. So she lit a
Oh,
candle.
mine.
Yeah.
That is absolutely.
But as for the original ghost, I've never seen her
No.
with
Well-
lots of different happenings. Glasses come off the shelf, candlesticks get moved, all types of things.
Yeah,
Lights
yeah.
get switched off.
The lady in cream that wanders
Yeah,
along the landing.
I've never felt that it's a really restful building, considering that she's supposed to be wandering around here somewhere. But I just saw the man.
But all of these other stories that actually are documented all pass into total insignificance compared to your story.
Yeah.
I really mean it. That is one of the. I've done
And
this.
I had 15 or 20 people that particular night stood here, have known me for years
yes,
and years and
witnesses.
years. Witnesses, and my son, my daughter, customers I've known for years said, this isn't right, you know, I'm stood there, and when they say silly things like your hair stands on end and your legs go like lead and jelly at the same time, that is
All that happened to you.
all that, and I couldn't move.
Wow.
Couldn't move for ages. Complete chicken wreck.
Amazing. I've been doing a national ghost tour of Great Britain. We've visited 24 counties already. I have never heard a ghost story as good as yours.
Thank you.
I really mean it. It is
Well, I just hope he comes
amazing.
back one day.
Yeah.
I just hope whoever or whatever he was, but he was so clear. If I had to give a description to the police, I would give it so distinctly. This green feather. On the other side of that was that we have a chap here. We call him Music Brian. He's a customer.
Yeah.
works with one of the local offices, very ordinary chap. He puts a pound of music on, has 2 pints every day. And he came in and I sat on
Same
the
place.
bench in the corner, and he came over and he started crying. What's the matter, Brian? And his dad had died at the same time I'd last seen the man in the corner. And he's a respectable, he works for an office for the government.
Yeah. It's not the sort of person that makes up silly
No,
stories.
respectable person. And he said, I said, did your dad ever wear a brown trilby with a green feather? And apparently he got married in one.
Well,
It's all
yeah.
linked. And now I could give you his name, which I wouldn't until I asked him, but
Yeah.
you'd know him. He's known as Music Brian, and he comes in here ever so ordinary, 40-odd, just had a baby, his wife just had a baby, a year old now. And that was it.
Amazing. Do you occupy that corner now?
That's known as my corner.
That's
If
your
anyone, any staff looking for me and they can't find me, they'll come in here and look.
They'll find you there.
Yep.
That is amazing. Francis, that's fantastic. Thanks very much indeed.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danger! Unstable cliff edge. Keep away. I'm really on the edge here. I don't like heights. I don't like ghosts either, but that's another story. I'm in the village of Haysborough looking for a rather special ghost. The ghost of a man that was murdered by his smuggler friends and dumped down a well. Unfortunately, they tell me that the well has gone because all along the cliff here were cottages, tunnels that went to the church, which is over there, and the pub, because this was a haven for smugglers. But as you can probably see, the cliff edge has gone. It's crumbling away, and so have the gardens and of course the wells that were once here. But this story concerns a smuggler who fell out with his fellow smugglers. They murdered him. They cut off his legs and tried to cut off his head to conceal the murder and dumped him down the well. On many, many occasions, the ghost of his torso has been seen floating from the beach into the village. It's a horrendous sight. It has no legs and its head has been nearly severed and is hanging off down its back, just secured by a few sinews of flesh and skin. It disappears into the village and it's then seen later returning back. It always has a sack in its hands. It went back to the well, and then the sack and the torso disappeared down the well. In the 1800s, a farmer whose land the well was actually on decided to investigate, and he actually dredged the well, and in it he found a sack. In that sack he found a pair of long boots, and inside the boots were the remains of the smuggler's legs. He also found the remains of the torso. They were taken to the local church and buried, but it didn't stop the ghost, because even the locals here tell of that story of seeing the torso wandering backwards and forwards from the village to the beach and disappearing down the well. There are other stories as well. There was a monastery up there with tunnels, and they say that people see the ghost of a monk wandering along from the monastery to the beach. And also the story of Blackknock, which of course in other counties around here is known as a barguest or a padfoot. It's a large black dog with red staring eyes. If you see it late at night, if it crosses your path, it's a harbinger of death. It means that in the near future, death will either come to you or to one of your family. This is the famous haunted bridge at Acle, a landmark for all people boating on the Norfolk Broads. There were at least two bridges before this one. The original, built in the 1600s, had a very sinister history. Legend has it that murderers and highwaymen were actually hanged off the bridge, hanging there, dying slowly, being strangled to death. They say that on dark windy nights, people going under the bridge can still hear the screams, the choked cries of those poor people being hanged. But there's a much more sinister story going back to the 1700s, the story of a man called Josiah Burge, who was a corn chandler. He lived in a cottage near the bridge. He was a wife beater, child beater and swindler, not a very popular man. Needless to say, one day he took the wife beating too far and killed his wife. He was prosecuted, taken to Norwich and tried for murder, but he'd bribed some of the jury. And he got off. His brother-in-law decided to take the law into his own hands, and on the anniversary of the death of his sister, the 7th of April, he was waiting on Acle Bridge with a large butcher's knife in his hand. Eventually, Josiah returned home walking across the bridge. His brother-in-law leapt out, wrestled him to the ground and cut his throat from ear to ear, nearly severing his head. The poor man died in a pool of blood. The brother-in-law ran away, took a boat to America, left England. Josiah was buried, and on the anniversary, the 7th of April, people say that the bloodstains always returned. You could see it in the stone. Many years later, Josiah's brother-in-law returned home to England. He thought it was okay now. He made out that he was surprised at the death of his brother-in-law. But after a period of time, he decided that he would like to return to the scene of the crime. And again, on the anniversary, the 7th of April, he returned to the bridge. He was standing, leaning on the bridge, looking over into the river, when all of a sudden, a ghostly, hazy figure made up of what looked like marsh gas rose out of the river, appeared on the bridge and walked towards him. The following morning, that brother-in-law was found hanging from the bridge, dead. So there's two ghosts, the ghost of the brother-in-law and the ghost of Josiah, who both haunt this bridge as well as the old bridge. And would you believe there's more ghost stories here, because the pub on Acle Bridge is haunted as well. There's also pictures inside of the original bridge, so why don't you come inside and have a look with me while I tell you the story of the ghost of the Bridge Inn at Acle. And here I am inside the Bridge Inn, overlooking the bridge at Acle. This place was notorious for smugglers, but also it was the place where people congregated on the day of a public execution. They would get their points, wander off outside and stand and watch those poor unfortunates being thrown off the bridge with a rope around their neck, and watch them struggling, choking as they died from slow strangulation. This place has also got a ghost, the ghost of a white lady that wanders the length of the pub in the dead of night. But customers standing at the bar say that they often feel someone or something brush past them. They turn and look. There's no one there. Is that the ghost of the white lady? Or is it the spirits behind the bar? We'll never know. But there is actually an original picture of the old bridge here in the bar. So come round here with me and I'll show you what it looked like. Here we have the original picture. That's the bridge where Josiah Burge was murdered and all those unfortunates were hanged. So next time you're going under the bridge on a boat, spare a thought for the sinister stories that went on this bridge. And if you feel, as you're going under the bridge, the drip, drip, drip of what you think is water, is it water? Or could it be the blood of Josiah Burge?